bucka, 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 bucka. Haha. You know the deal.
The next thing that we're going to talk about with relations is writing relations as ordered pairs. So just as a quick review, in the last video we saw how to write an equation given a mathematical relationship. And one of the examples that I talked about was if you have a job and you get paid $12 per hour. So we came up with this equation from that relationship where y is the total pay and x is the number of hours. So total pay is 12 times the number of hours. So we write that relationship as y equals 12x. Well, it's possible that in our job we might only work certain numbers of hours. So for example, let's say you work shifts where you have to work 8 hours and you either work 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 days a week, and you want to calculate how much money you work per week. Well, in this case, if we work no days, of course we'll work 0 hours, and if we work 0 hours we'll get 0 pay. Well, if we can only work 8-hour shifts, that means that if we work for 1 day, we're going to get paid for 8 hours. And if we work for 8 hours, that means that we're going to make $96. If we work for 2 days, that means that we're working 16 hours. If we work 16 hours, we get paid $192. If we work for 3 days, and again, because we can only work 8-hour shifts, that means that we've worked for 24 hours, which means we make $288. If we work for 4 days, then that means we would work for 32 hours, and if we work for 32 hours, we get paid $384. And finally, if we work for 5 days, that means we're working for 40 hours. And if we work for 40 hours, that means that we get paid $480. So this is an example where there's a limitation on what the values of x can be, and therefore that means there's a limitation on what the values of y can be. So if we're calculating how much money we make per week, and we work only 8-hour shifts and 8 hours per day, these are all the possibilities. So all the possibilities for x are called the domain. So in this case, the domain are all the possible values that we have there for x. And again, in this case, it's those values because we can only work 8-hour shifts, and we can only work up to 5 days a week. So in this case, well, we could work 0 days, which means 0 hours, or we could work 8 hours, 16, 24, 32, and 40. So those are all the possible values of x in this case. So all the possible values of x, again, is called the domain. The range is all the corresponding values of y. So it's also all the possible values, but in this case it's all the possible values of y. And as we see in our table there, our range is 0, 96, 192, 288, 384, and 480. So with some mathematical relationships, there are limitations on what the values of x can be, and if there's limitations on what the values of x can be, that usually means there's limitations on what the values of y can be. The limitations on what x are is the domain. The limitation on what y can be is the range. Now the next thing we're going to talk about here is writing these values as ordered pairs. An ordered pair is just what it sounds like. It's written as a pair in order. So usually when we're writing ordered pairs, we put those ordered pairs in brackets. And they're ordered because they go in actually alphabetical order. The x value always comes first, and then the y value, the corresponding y value. So if we look at our first pair of values here, x is 0, y is 0. So if we write that as an ordered pair, it would be 0, 0. Our next ordered pair is, well, x is 8 and y is 96. and so on. Our next ordered pair that we have there, x is 16, y is 192. Our next set of ordered pairs that we'll have is x is 24, then y is 288. Second last one, x is 32, y is 384. And finally, the last value there, x is 40, and y is 480. So these are all of our ordered pairs for this relationship. Again, an ordered pair is written in brackets, and the x value comes first, and then the y value. Let's take a look at another example of coming up with a table of values and writing ordered pairs and stating the domain and the range. So here we've got a relation, and I don't really know what this relation is, but we've got a relation where we're subtracting y from x and it equals 4. So here's an example where we just have an equation and we have to come up with our ordered pairs. The first thing I'd like to do in this equation is isolate y. Usually y is the variable that we want to get by itself. So that's my first step. We're going to isolate. So in getting y by itself, it really doesn't matter which side of the equal sign y is on. So since I have this minus y here, I'm going to want to bring that over to the right-hand side here. And that'll make it positive y or plus y, which means that I'll have to bring this 4 over to the left side of the equation, which means it'll become minus 4. So if I rewrite that equation where y is by itself, the equation looks something like this. So because I brought positive 4 over to the left-hand side, it becomes minus 4. And because I brought minus y over to this side, it becomes positive y or just y. So there we've got y isolated. Now, if you want to, you can rewrite that equation as y equals x minus 4. It's exactly the same. X minus 4 equals y is the same as y equals x minus 4. So our next step is to come up with a table of values. Now, sometimes we're given a table of values with our values of x, and sometimes we're not. And if we're not, we can just come up with whatever values of x we want and solve y. In this case, though, we are given some values here for x. So x can be 0, 4, 8, or 12. So really, what we're trying to do now is figure out what y is. So we're going to take each of those values of x and substitute into this equation. So if I substitute 0 in there for x, the equation looks something like this. So instead of writing an x, I'm going to write a 0. So we have y equals 0 minus 4. Well, 0 minus 4 is negative 4. So if x is 0, y has to be negative 4. And if I keep going, well, if I substitute that 4 into that equation, then I would get y equals 4 minus 4. And 4 minus 4 is 0. I keep going, I substitute the 8 into the equation. 8 minus 4 is 4. And finally, I substitute the last value of x, which is 12. 12 minus 4 is 8. The next thing I want to do is rewrite the values that I have in my table values as ordered pairs. So again, when we're writing ordered pairs, we're always writing the values in brackets with the x value first and the y value second. The way you can remember that is it's in alphabetical order as well. X comes before y in the alphabet, so x comes before y in our ordered pairs. So our first coordinate there, we've got x is 0, y is 4. So if we're going to write that as an ordered pair, we put the x value and then the y value. The next ordered pair we have, x is 4, y is 0. Third one, x is 8, y is 4, and finally the last one, x is 12 and y is 8. So again, it's just another way to write the sets of values. The x value always comes first, and then the y value in brackets with a comma in between them. So the last thing we're going to do here is state the domain and the range. And as we talked about in the last video, the domain is the limitation on what x can be. Now sometimes there's no limitation on what x can be, but in this case I did have a specific set of values for x, what x could be, so that's my domain. So my domain in this case is all of those possible x values. So my domain would be 0, 4, 8, and 12. So those are all the possible values there that we have for x. And our range is all the corresponding values for y. So in this case, our range is the y values that we got when we substituted those values in for x. And of course, our y values are -4, 0, 4, and 8. So there's our domain and our range. Okay, so the last thing I want you to try here to see how well you understand relations as ordered pairs is to complete the following for this equation here. So the first thing I'm going to want you to do and we're talking about this equation here, is isolate y. So isolate y in that equation, and then complete this table of values. So I've given you a limitation on what x can be. Find the corresponding values for y. Rewrite the values that you come up with in this table as ordered pairs, and then finally state the domain and the range. And if you are able to do that, congratulations, you now have a firm understanding of relations as ordered pairs.